Alright gamers, let's talk about Garten of Banban 4. I took my time with this one because quite honestly I felt the need to give myself a breather from Banban. I decided to make a video about a game that I have at least a shred of passion for. I've played much more interesting and enjoyable indie horror games lately. I've been doing some speedrunning on the side. I'm feeling pretty good, so I'm ready to talk about this absolute slog of a game. Garten of Banban 4 is the most boring Banban game we have gotten so far. It is not the technical or objective worst, but it's actually my least favorite because it is an absolute snore. Garten of Banban 1 was funny in how bad it was, and it was so simple that I found ways to have fun with it. Garten of Banban 2 is quite horrendous, but it had a pretty cool speedrun and some entertaining moments. Garten of Banban 3, despite still being terrible, shook things up in a way by having some surprisingly passable sequences and a more generally comedic tone. Garten of Banban 4 has nothing. Literally nothing. The latest entry in the Banban series takes a much more story-focused approach than the other games, with the narrative and feeling cinematic clearly being the priorities. However, Garten of Banban does not have good or interesting writing, and it doesn't even attempt to tell its story in an exciting way, so there is nothing to work with here. And yet I have a lot to say, so bear with me here. Garten of Banban 3 also decided to prioritize its story in a sense, but it did so in a way that could be entertaining. I still think it sucks, and I spoke about my issues with the comedic tone in my Banban 3 review, but at least there was a comedic approach. That's something. I can at least look back at being in a car with Opilabird, or the closing fight scene, and chuckle. Almost all of the runtime in Banban 4 is just long, drawn-out cutscenes of a character talking. Sheriff Toadster and Queen Bouncelia take up a ridiculous amount of the game, talking lifelessly about nothing of interest. The only exception to this that I can give a pass to is the new character, Bitter Giggle the Jester. This character is voiced by a voice actor named Ty Coker, who actually delivers the best performance in the entire series by a significant margin. Slow Celine, Queen Bouncelia, and Sheriff Toadster all have totally acceptable voices, but Bitter Giggle actually has a shred of life to him. The voice is pretty Joker-esque. It could have been a little more original, but it's fun, and the character actually feels like a character, which cannot be said about literally anyone else. I don't want to harp on the story elements and character writing too much because, believe it or not, there is nothing interesting, so I'd rather just not bother. However, there are two big moments before we get into the mid-ass gameplay. First of all, Banban is our BFF once again, and he gives us some mind-blowing information. He reveals to us that his name is Uthman. This is, of course, I say of course, like everyone else has their entire brain dedicated to remembering boring Banban details. This is, of course, referring to Uthman Adam, a character we have known about since the very first game. There are theories as to whether or not Banban is actually Uthman after an experiment gone wrong, or if he is just convinced that he really is Uthman and has his memories and stuff. But I guess we can't know for sure, technically, and also, I don't care. With the next thing, though, I need to do my best to not get extremely angry talking about this. Garten of Banban 4 has innovated the indie horror genre by being the first game to contain an official and canonical crossover. Sure, Hello Neighbor and Bendy have done their thing, Monsters and Mortals is a game that exists, but Garten of Banban 4, to my knowledge, is the first indie horror game to cross over with another and have it be in a mainline title. In Banban 3, Stinger Flynn drugs us and forces us into a fever dream where we're in a car with the gang and it crashes. I'm sure you remember this. In Banban 4, we are drugged and forced into a fever dream by Stinger Flynn once again, and it takes place after the previous car crash. Our iconic squad is stranded in the forest, which doesn't make any sense after a car crash in a large desert, but whatever. And unfortunately for our brave heroes, a wild monster attacks them in the woods. This monster being a spider that is also a train with a Choo Choo Charles is in Garten of Banban 4. The developer of Choo Choo Charles, 2-Star, follows me on Twitter, and they gifted me Choo Choo Charles for free. So I really don't want to be harsh here. I'm sure they are lovely. I have no problems with them. But I need to know, why would you let this happen? I've heard people say that 2-Star has been friends with the Euphoric Brothers since before Banban came out, but I have no idea what the proof of that is. Very few people knew the Euphoric Brothers online prior to Banban, and they're from different countries, so it's not like they knew each other outside of game development or online stuff. So I don't know, it just seems unlikely, but I guess it's possible 2-Star was a huge fan of Egghead Gumpty or something like that. And you can be friends with whoever you want, I don't care. But surely you can understand why this is damaging to the character that you made and the career you have built with them. First of all, Garten of Banban is a piece of shit, and it isn't and shouldn't be taken seriously by anyone. No one respects this series because it is lazily made for the sake of profit. And for the record, it's okay when games are made for profit. I feel like that goes without saying, but you actually need to deliver a quality product to earn said profit, which the Euphoric brothers historically and continue to be not too bothered with. Choo Choo Charles spent plenty of time in development and produced a very solid product that was widely respected by everyone that heard of it. These games are simply not on the same level. And it would be one thing if this was 2-Star helping out a smaller developer with a really good game to show off, but that is so far from the case. Garten of Banban has a huge audience of children and doesn't need help, and it doesn't deserve the courtesy of help regardless. And that is the other thing that 2-Star has either changed their mind on or somehow didn't think about, the audience and how they will now view Choo Choo Charles. I know from behind-the-scenes information I have that 2-Star really didn't want Choo Choo Charles to fall into the trap of being a mascot horror game. They didn't want the game and the character to be less respected because of the stigma of the genre. They also wanted to make sure they didn't accidentally make the game appeal to a younger audience. So please tell me, what happened to all of that? Choo Choo Charles is now forever associated with the most child-friendly mascot horror title of all time. There are going to be dumbass children that solely view Choo Choo Charles as a Garten of Banban character. Those people, and the amount of people in that group could be in the millions, will always see Choo Choo Charles as that stupid baby character from that stupid baby game. And Choo Choo Charles as a game and character, and 2-Star as a developer, deserve better than that. Allowing Choo Choo Charles to be in Garten of Banban 4 is the worst thing that 2-Star could have done. I understand if you have a level of love and or respect for the game or the developers, and I also understand that Garten of Banban is the trending thing right now that people in the scene are talking about, whereas Choo Choo Charles, its time in the spotlight has unfortunately been over for a while. But there are just so many reasons that this crossover shouldn't have happened, and it will forever affect a really solid IP's reputation in a negative way. This is easily my least favorite thing about this game, even if it had nothing to do with the actual game. Speaking of the actual game, yeah, that does also exist. Again, Garten of Banban 4 has the least amount of gameplay in a Banban game since the first game, so I genuinely do not even care to linger on this, but I know I have to, because 1, I need to really emphasize how boring this game is, and 2, there are highlights in this game, but there's also lowlights. Let's get this over with, chat, squad, homies. The very opening of the game is a brief chase sequence with this freakish monster from the third game, whose name is so long that I refuse to even call it by name. This is incredibly easy to beat as long as you sprint, and is unnecessarily loud. After the chase ends, we are shown a new gimmick in this game. I'm just kidding, this is used literally 2 times in the whole game, and is a stupid waste of a decent idea. Basically, you need to use your new bird friend to apply pressure to 2 buttons on the floor at once. And I am not kidding, this is introduced at the beginning of the game, and is used 1 more time after this. Which is actually unfortunate, this was a pretty decent idea. Could have been one of the better things in this series. Once you've escaped one of the worst monsters in all of indie horror and used your new friend as a paperweight, you get drugged and kidnapped by Sheriff Toadster. This new frog-like friend interrogates you and asks you a series of questions, most of them being about whether or not you have interacted with certain characters. When I first did this, I thought that correct answers would let you proceed, and lies would result in failure. This is not the case! Doing this does not matter and means nothing and doesn't provide really any information relating to the game or story. This is literally pointless. Following your interrogation, there is a long cutscene of boring dialogue. Again, there's a lot of this in the game, so I will not linger on it each time. During this cutscene, we learn that our task throughout the game is to collect multiple gears to repair the elevator, and this is when I realized that this game is blatantly ripping off Chapter 3 of the first Bendy, and somehow making it even worse. That was already, like, one of the worst chapters of a not very good and poorly aged game. Why did you go with that, of all the things? We set out on our quest alongside Sheriff Toadster and our friend Little Beak. That's the bird's name. We grab some tickets to utilize the godforsaken transportation system and travel to our first room. This is the first real sequence of the game, I would say. There are a load of vents in this room, and Nab is hiding in some of them. You need to approach the vents carefully, and if your little bird squeaks near one of them, that means Nab is there. And you know what? I think this sequence is totally fine. Maybe it's a little too long, making it boring by the end, but I think this is creative, and the closest Banban has come to being genuinely suspenseful. It is not great, but there is something here that I can respect. After you make it to the end, you get your first gear and bring it to the broken elevator. Sheriff Toadster and Little Beak decide to stay at the elevator to work on it. No, I don't know why the baby bird needs to stay there. Yes, I do. It's for plot convenience. Next, there is another unnecessarily long cutscene where we find out that Banban is waiting for us in the infirmary. We talked to Banban about how he did not mean to do what he did in the last game, and oops, I don't care. Then we talked to Stinger Flynn for way too long, and then endure the Choo Choo Charles cutscene. Notice that we went from a long walk to the elevator to a long-ass cutscene with the purple kangaroo to a long-ass monologue with Banban to a long-ass monologue with Stinger Flynn to a long-ass cutscene with Choo Choo Charles. I told you this game was boring and had basically no gameplay. I was being fully serious with you. After all that boring shit, we move on to our next section with Banban accompanying us. There's a drone puzzle. Remember the drone exists? I bet you forgot by now. There's also this optional room in pretty much the same area with a bunch of rejected versions of the Jester. One of them is voiced by YouTuber Think Noodles. I don't know why. If any of you thought, hey, maybe Banban will go away at some point, they got Choo Choo Charles in this, another very famous horror game, and a YouTuber with 10 million subs. It's sticking around, squad. After that, Banban tries to set up an imposter for another character, but Nab steals it. We then chase Nab with Banban, but there's literally no threat here aside from falling during a brief platforming section. Normally, in a chase sequence in a horror game, there's a risk of death or at least failure. Not here, though. Banban beats the shit out of Nab and both of them stay in this room. We collect our second gear and move on. Yes, this is only the second gear. I actually cannot wait for the sweet embrace of death. We do at least get to see Zolphius here. That makes me really, really happy. You know the deal. Long walk back and long cutscene with Purple Kangaroo. And at this point, we can actually say hi to all of our Banban friends from over the months. Sheriff Toadster has imprisoned them all and recorded audio logs for each of them that we can listen to. This is optional, so I won't call it padding, and it is actually kind of funny at times. Like, Sheriff Toadster calls Jumbo Josh the Green Gorilla, and I don't know, that gets a good little chuckle out of me. After all this, we actually have one of the best sequences in the entire Banban series, and then the worst thing that I've ever seen immediately after it. There's this sequence that is basically, I'm on observation duty, but you walk around and look for the changes physically. There are multiple rooms you look through, then you press a button to start the game, and something will change. Sometimes the changes are obvious, and sometimes they are pretty hard to spot. This is one of my favorite things the Banban series has done. It's pretty well done, it's interesting, it's challenging at points. I genuinely think this is a highlight of the whole series. However, after this part, there is a boss fight that sucks so bad it deserves my username. First of all, this character, Kittysaurus, is one of, if not the worst characters in the franchise. They stole the body of a random dinosaur and threw a random cat head on it and made this disgusting, boring mesh of garbage. I absolutely despise it. But also, this boss is poorly made, boring, dysfunctional. I cannot stress how much I hate this boss fight. The way this works is Kittysaurus will follow you and face your direction, and you need to make it hit the boards above these buttons when they're lit up. You dictate which board is lit up using the buttons on the ground. This sucks because of how finicky Kittysaurus's movements are, and because of how long it takes for them to charge. If they just charged towards you faster, then this game would have been infinitely better. But instead, they spend so much time walking around, and you try to set them up in the right position, but then they're way too close to you all of a sudden. They also have a weirdly large hitbox, so it's stupidly easy to die at what feels like random. This is basically the last part of the game that has any gameplay, and it is one of the worst things in the franchise, and it's actually tragic. Once you've beaten that godforsaken boss and you collect some crystals for literally no reason, you go collect your last gear, but oh no, Bitter Giggle has trapped you in the room. If only there was an obvious button that would open the door. Again, I do actually give this moment more of a pass than usual because Bitter Giggle is an unironically decent character. You hit the obvious button with the drone, you run to the main area, Toadster is fucking dead on the ground, Bitter Giggle makes the queen laugh, her laugh causes a nuclear explosion, and we all die and the game ends. That's not a completely inaccurate summary of the ending, so I'm going to leave it at that. If you don't know the end, oh well. As most of you probably know, Garten of Banban 5 and 6 were both announced at the same time. 5 seems to be a prequel with no hint of a release date, and 6 seems to be coming out next. This is obviously weird, but Star Wars did it, so I guess anyone can. I will obviously stream the next Banban game, and the one after that, and the one after that, but I really hope it isn't as boring as this one. I know people in general are tired of the Banban series, but I have genuinely had fun with some of them because of how stupid they are. But this one did nothing for me. It isn't a good game, nor is it funny bad. It is just an absolute snore. It genuinely offended me. It only featured like 3 real sequences, it was painfully boring, and tried way too hard to act like it had a story to tell. It took me so long to actually make a video on this because this game bores me to death, but despite how boring it is, I apparently had a lot more than I thought to say about it. So, there you go. Now get out of here.